Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com again, and today's video is a continuation from yesterday's video whereby I compared three decks: the Piatnik by Krebs, the Hess by Giordano Berti, and the Lando also by Giordano Berti. Yesterday I compared the Triumph cards or the Trump cards, and today I'm going to be comparing the pip cards of those three decks. Why did I choose those three decks? Well, clearly because the Piatnik and the Hess, or the Krebs and the Hess, are, by Germanic-speaking countries. The Lando is from Piedmont, so it's kind of the oddball. But you know what? You don't know unless you try, and sometimes you get interesting connections between cultures when you just look at them. So let me flip the camera and we will get with it. If you want to know anything I've said about any of these three decks, you can go look in the description or listen to the video from yesterday, and you'll hear that. I'm just going to be comparing the pip cards of these three decks today. So what's interesting that yesterday was that, two or maybe all three of the decks had some similarities to both TDM1 and TDM2 styles. If you're not sure of what I'm talking about, I've done a million videos on TDM1, TDM2. You could probably cross-reference those, or just watch yesterday's videos because I commented on all the characteristics that might have been TDM1 or TDM2. But as far as I know, there's nothing ever been discussed about TDM1, TDM2 in the pips, which is kind of interesting. Okay, the similarity between these two decks, the Krebs and the Lando, are that they both have some kind of flower at the tip of the sword, or at least on the top of the crown. Here we don't see it. Here in the Hess, we just have the sword piercing through the crown. They all seem to have similar embellishments regarding what other floral motifs are emanating from the crown itself. We have the same direction in the Lando and the Krebs, and a mirror image of the Hess. Although look at the handle of these two swords. They're very similar, aren't they? I didn't comment on any of the cardstock. I think the cardstock of all three are great. The Piatnik has a sheen, so it's kind of got like some kind of a coating on it. Oh, here are the backs of the three in respective order. So the Piatnik is kind of got a coating on it, whereas Giordano's decks are more similar to one another, high quality cardstock. Here, let me show you. I mean, there's plenty of cards here to do this, so. This is the Piatnik. This is the Hess. Oh, look at that. Oh, my God. Yeah, Giordano's decks are lovely quality. This, of all three, this one's my favorite cardstock, the Hess. Oh, man, nice. Okay. Some of you may be like me, and you like having that kind of sensation, So I'm just going to put all the swords in the same direction. I don't know which one was the original intention, but again, you'll notice the handles of two of them being similar. And not the same two as before, though, which is kind of interesting. I don't think it was the same. Yeah. Not the same two this time, but this time they're similar and in reverse of one another. That's interesting. So the Lando and the Krebs have more similarity in the flower, in the center. And again, the handle of the Lando and the Krebs are more similar. The handle of the sword. You know, when you look at the suits individually and you compare them with each other, you know, you may, you know, I don't know how often, you know, we ever really compare the pips of decks. You know, most of the time we are only comparing the triumph cards or the trump cards, right? But, you know, especially with a suit like the swords, you see the tension. You can see why, you know, there could be anger or, you know, frustration or, you know, tension, absolutely tension in the suit of swords. And depending on the question, I mean, if the question is about, well, a legal issue come to an end, you know, I am dealing with a legal situation, for example. If you get a lot of swords, you know, the swords could suggest that, you know, a legal thing is going on and how it will resolve itself, perhaps, you know, or what things to look for. But if the question is of a different nature, like, you know, is someone a good match for me, and you get a lot of swords, you know, it might suggest something different depending on the other cards and depending on the nature of the question, right? It could indicate tension between individuals or something that, you know, that maybe one of them is cruel, for example. Or it could just be innocently expressing that they're both people in the legal profession and they might meet somebody else in the legal profession, that kind of thing. So you always want to take a look at the context of the question. But you could definitely see how each suit can lend itself to different things. I mean, the suit of swords isn't necessarily just a mean suit or a suit of violence. Definitely, they're weapons, so for sure you can't overlook that. For the clubs either, the batons either. But I don't think that the suit of swords is intrinsically aggressive or bad, you know, as it progressively goes on, like we see in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, right? We can see by 8, 9, 10 that we're talking about tragedy. And even in the 3, we see, you know, unrest or, you know, painful things. So here their crowns are more similar. You know, it's interesting across the board that all 3 of the kings are seated on something that's like a bench, you know, maybe not quite a chair, although we're not really sure what's going on with this line here. There's a P here, perhaps for Piatnik, I don't know. And the cups. So we have, you know, the same kind of geometric cup and details on all of them with these peculiar things. You know, is it water leaking? I don't know. just embellishments. And cups, you know, the way I interpret the cups and also the coins are a little bit more soothing. They're not weapons, right? A lot of times when we make associations between cups and coins, they're usually for positive things like emotions, good emotions and negative emotions as well. And also like the things that money can buy or creature comforts in the case of the coin. So in that way, it might be said that the cups and coins are less likely perhaps to be negative, except that, for example, if you're doing a reading regarding an emotional or very upsetting circumstances and you get a lot of cups, it could indicate that there's a lot of emotional unrest, depending on the numbers and depending on where they're located in the spread, right? Especially, for example, if we have a lot of cups with, the elemental dignities of say fire interspersed, or even sometimes, the sword cups could indicate, emotional trauma or, something that's not very wonderful in the, emotional world. So you have to look at all the cards. I tend not to ever really just look at one card in a reading. I don't do one card readings. The least I do is usually usually 3 or 4, unless I'm trying to do yes or no. And I just come up with a quick remedy for a yes or no, maybe I'll say if it's a cup card, it'll be yes. If it's a coin card, it'll be yes. If it's, and that's just arbitrary and random. However, I might predetermine what would be a yes or a no. But for the most part, and even I don't typically do yes or no questions because I just try to have more critical thinking questions. And if somebody, has a yes or no question, I redirect them really to, to ask the question in such a way where they would have more responsibility in obtaining what it is they want to accomplish, rather than just, do the fates allow me to do this, yes or no? It's because it takes away the client's responsibility and their opportunity really to participate in the outcome of their own lives. I mean, since I started reading, I was never comfortable with, the fortune-telling aspect as far as, will this happen? Will that happen? More, I've always been interested in saying, well, what could you do? Or what things haven't you thought of that might lend themselves to getting a more favorable outcome? Or what things might you avoid, It's just, tarot for me has become a way of just looking at a situation from different lenses and trying to come up with a course of action whereby we would take responsibility for our own lives. Okay, now here we have the 10 cup, the 10th cup on the top. Oh, somehow I screwed up. Oops, my bad. I got mixed up somehow. You probably noticed it before I did, so I apologize. But here we have the 10th cup. Okay, the 10th cup in all 3 are sideways. Ah, but this one, the Hess is in the opposite direction. So I'm sorry about having, I got a couple out of order. Oh my goodness. Well, I apologize for that. Here's my boyfriend. Okay. And these two on the end, the Hess and the Lando, he's got a flower wreath and he's clearly covering the chalice with his garment. And he's carrying some kind of football looking hat in his hand. in all three. And here, he kind of looks like he's got a baseball cap on, so we know that it couldn't have been a baseball cap, obviously. But he, I wouldn't say that he has a wreath on his head here. And I guess it could be suggested that the cloth garment is sort of, kind of covering the chalice, but not exactly. So the decorative, I don't know what that is called in horse language, but this thing is a different style in all three. Ah, look at this. Okay, and all three are examples of something hanging over, and in two of them, the Lando and the Hess, has this, and I've spoken on this a number of times on different decks, but has, here it looks as though it's the back of the chair that's curling, right, like part of the throne, or the top of the canopy of the chair is curled in, right? It's over her and then coming down. But here, was that detail misunderstood to be a window? And just in subsequent years done to be a window? I mean, at some point, the hung over canopy does appear to have turned into a window. I've mentioned it in many videos, and I've never read it in any book that this, was, this is what happened. It's just my own observation. But I'm wondering, you look at enough decks, you start seeing things. And the king. So they all have the same posture, with the hand on the hip in the same way, the same sideways glance in the same direction, the same kind of ornate kind of hat, crown. And they all have cudgels for the Ace of Batons. So we're more than halfway through. So if you've hung out this long, I really appreciate that you have, and I hope that you feel as though it's been worth it, and just seeing these beautiful decks and how they compare with one another. Now see this, these are sprawling things on the sides, whereas here, sprawling here as well. Isn't that interesting? So what is that, the 8? Excuse me, the 6. Wow. Okay, that's interesting. They share, these two in particular, the Hess and the Lando, seem to share that in common. This similar, but not quite the same. And the flowers are all a little different. None of them are quite the same as each other. Oh, and these two, the Lando and the Krebs, have the similar thing going on there. with the leaves on the sides. Now for batons, you know, I kind of see the batons as social, you know, like I kind of equate it with social activity. It could represent work or working together with other people, passions, right? You know, doing things because you love to do them with a crowd of people. That's what batons have become for me. They are still weapons. And if you see them in unison with a lot of swords, you know, they could suggest an aggressive outcome, or to take care and consider, you know, something might be aggressive if not handled properly. I love how Lando wrote his name on every card. Now we see this kind of incompleteness on the horse in a few tarot decks. Maybe the Dodal had it too, if I'm not mistaken. And then here, look how elaborate that blanket is. Wow. So these two face in the same direction. This one is a little different. The Hess is a little different. Now look how lovely, you know, like this is like a carved piece of wood as a staff rather than a cudgel. And in these two, she's a blonde. And the last suit of coins. The luxuries that money can buy, the education that money can buy, the well-being that money can buy. Money can buy stuff. You know, I've been rich and I've been poor, and I'll tell you what, it's a lot nicer to have a little bit of money. You know, I'm not going to lie about that. And, you know, I don't know why I'm saying all that, except that we're talking about the suit of coins and what the suit of coins can represent. So here it seems that this is probably the correct orientation. And I can't tell, but I think this is the correct orientation here. So it's in the reverse. And here we don't have any names at all written on the two of coins. I'll just make them the same. And we have the initials of, I guess, Johann Christoph Hess in this thing. Here we just have a fleur-de-lis. What do we have here? A fleur-de-lis. Here we have a singular fleur-de-lis, and here we have three. So you see with TDM, with the suits and the number, you know, that's what you have. You have suit and you have number. And one of, the way I interpreted the cards, or the way I taught myself, was just to come up with an understanding of what the number 5 can represent, an example, and then blend it and merge it with the suit of coins. So depending on the other cards, this could suggest instability in the realm of comfort, or instability in the realm of finances. Depends on the question, right? And what the other cards are. So instability can sometimes be a good thing, because if the other cards are, say you have a couple cards that are numbered less than the 5, so you have, let's say, a 2 and a 3, and then you have a 5, you could say, well, it's improving, it's changing for the better. So it's not just necessarily instability being a bad thing. Sometimes instability can suggest change for the better. So you always have to look at all the cards, and it's complex. Interpreting the cards is complex. I've been, I think I'll be doing it like nearly 50 years in a year or two, and I'm still learning stuff. People might think that I'm pretty proficient, and I would agree, I'm proficient. But there's still room for improvement, and there's still room for learning. And if you don't feel that way with the deck you're using, it's time to move on to another deck. Because it's an endlessly fascinating rabbit hole, at least for me. Now, the thing I really kind of like about the Hess is that Berti, it seems as though he may have, used light in order to, varying light in order to catch better the detail of the cards. But it seems as though he didn't do anything to the originals. He just photographed them. He may had to vary the amount of light he used for each card in order to bring it, it's for the best contrast, right? And I don't know what Piatnik did. I don't know if that's what he did there. And it seems as though the Lando was probably a deck in pretty good condition. So this is not, so did I screw up again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, this is, okay. So the Lando and the Hess are more similar in the distribution of the coins than the Krebs, which is interesting. Some people may think this looks like a dining room table. If you're talking about how will my party go, right? And then you see these, this. Okay, it can talk about the finer things in life, but it can also talk about, pay attention to the details of the meal. Pay attention to the details of how the table looks to help impress your guests or whatever. And that's why I love Tarot of Marseille, because the images, even in the pips, can represent some people might see this as a road, or a passageway, the space in between, as a direction. The Marseille, I'm not going to say it's easier or harder. Some people are definitely intimidated by it, and it seems harder because clearly you don't have the answers, drawn out for you, like you would in, the Rider-Waite-Smith tradition. But, you can see things in the images or the distribution of the pips that might lend you to think in a certain way in the context of the question being asked. I mean, here, you could see this is isolation, a group of people and one person is isolated, right? Somebody needs to be treated with kid gloves, or there's somebody that needs to be protected in a crowd. I mean, that's an interesting way to see it, right? It all depends on the question. So with TDM, you can see it as definitely number and suit, but you can also see it as, what it suggests in the context of a question. And we're down to the last 3 core cards. So for those of you who hung out with me for 30 minutes, I thank you. If you have hung out this long, I presume you found it engaging. Please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please share me. Please comment. I appreciate anything that you could do to help me advance my small little channel. I get about $100 every 6 months from YouTube. So it's not as though it's a whopping, help, but it is a little bit of a help. It lets me buy decks, every 6 months I can justify spending $100 or on a deck or, maybe 50, and I can get 2 decks. In addition to my income from the cards, interpreting the cards or selling my lessons. But every little bit helps in this day and age. Interestingly, in this deck, we have the king holding a coin and there's a coin floating. In these 2 decks, there is no coin floating, which is interesting. And the hats are different in all 3. Now, if I have to do a judgment on which of these decks I love the most, it's the Hess. I love the Hess for the sound it makes when you, and see how flexible, look at that. Oh, look at that, it's heavenly. And even in the other Giordano Berti deck is not quite as, I want to say buttery, right? And these are a little bit more stiff. These are a bit more stiff. But if we look at the facial expressions of all of the individuals in the Hess, they're just friendly people. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this comparison of pips. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well.